The spectrum of consciousness, full story. The spectrum of consciousness. In my meditation, I came to realize that consciousness is like sediment in different degrees, and it expresses itself that way through peoples. I do not mean that as hatred. I do not mean that as prejudice. I do not mean that one individual person is worth more than another individual person. That is not what I am trying to say. I am trying to speak about consciousness, symbolism, maturity, expression, and the way that the one becomes many without ever truly becoming separate from itself. This is hard to explain because the moment I start using words that point toward peoples, cultures, colors, or forms of expression, it can sound like I am talking about individuals in a hateful way. I am not. I love people. I would give my life for people. This is not coming from hatred. It is an observation about reality, symbolism, consciousness, and the way things appear when you meditate on them for years and try to understand what is actually being shown. What I am talking about is not merely the individual person. The individual matters, of course. One man can be 45 years old, and another man beside him can also be 45, and yet one can be more mature than the other in many ways. Even then, the one who seems less mature overall may still be more mature in certain areas. Maturity is not one flat thing. There are many kinds of maturity and immaturity. But that is still only the individual level. What I am trying to describe goes beyond that. I am talking about a collective expression of consciousness, a shared ethos, a way that consciousness moves through peoples, through cultures, through environments, through language, rhythm, behavior, imagination, order, disorder, discipline, relaxation, invention, and the way a peoples carries itself in the world. It is not exact, and yet in another way it is exact. That is why it becomes so difficult to speak about. It is exact symbolically, but not exact in the shallow, literal, exoteric way people usually want things to be exact. It is true as a pattern, but not as a simple accusation against individuals. It is visible as a movement of consciousness, but not as something that can be reduced to one person, one face, one body, or one simple judgment. Every point contains the whole. That is the thing that has to be remembered through all of this. Nothing is truly divided from the standpoint of the absolute. There is no separation there. There is no piece cut away from the rest. But in manifestation, the whole appears as parts. It appears as colors. It appears as stages. It appears as degrees. It appears as peoples, continents, cultures, languages, ways of being, ways of building, ways of dreaming, ways of moving, and ways of understanding. That is why the answer becomes yes, no, no, yes. It is the same consciousness, yes. It is not the same in how it expresses, no. It is not actually divided, no. It appears divided in manifestation, yes. That is the movement. Same, not same. Not divided, divided. Whole, and yet appearing as many. The world itself shows this. Even the continents look like pieces of a puzzle, separated now but still suggesting that they once fit together. You can think of Pangaea, or Lemuria, or Atlantis, or any of those symbolic memories of unity before separation. Whether someone takes those things literally or symbolically, the image is still there. The one land becomes many lands. The one becomes pieces. The pieces still belong to the one. That is how consciousness appears to me. It is like one whole reality expressing itself through many separated pieces, while underneath the separation there is still unity. When I use the symbols black, red, yellow, and white, I am not saying black man, red man, yellow man, white man in a shallow racial way. I am speaking symbolically. I am speaking about colors as expressions of consciousness. I am speaking about stages, degrees, maturity, elements, body, spirit, and the way these things appear both inwardly and outwardly. The first stage, roughly from 0 to 10, is symbolized by black. The next stage, roughly 10 to 20, is symbolized by red. The next stage, roughly 20 to 30, is symbolized by yellow. The stage beyond that is symbolized by white. These are not literal ages in a simple way. They are bands of consciousness. They are symbolic stages of maturity. They are ways that consciousness arranges itself and expresses itself. The black is not lesser. That has to be understood. It is not lesser. It is the beginning, the depth, the womb, the pupil, the darkness, the water, the moon, the silver glint upon the black surface, the place where light is hidden before it becomes visible. It is not empty darkness. It is full darkness. It is potential. It is the unseen. It is where things begin. When you look at black symbolically, you see it everywhere. You see it in the pupil of the eye. You see it when the lights are out. You see it in the womb. You see it in the soil. You see it in the hidden place before manifestation. You see it in the unknown before the known appears. And if you look at something black, like black paint or black hair, there is often a glint upon it. There is a shine. There is a white layer of light on it, a point of light reflected from it. So it is not just black. It is black with shine. It is black with silver. It is black carrying the light inside itself. That is important because we are born in water. We are born of water. Water is a symbol of spirit. The moon is also tied to water and spirit, and the moon is silver. In the womb there is darkness, water, spirit, and hidden life. That is why darkness cannot simply mean nothing. Darkness is light that has not become visible yet. Light is spirit, and spirit is invisible. So darkness is not the enemy of light. Darkness is the hidden form of light before it shines outward. That is the deeper symbol of black. It is the primordial darkness, like the darkness before creation, the chaos before order, the unseen before the seen. Not chaos as evil, but chaos as the original depth where everything is still held together before it becomes separated into visible forms. It is the place where the one has not yet become many, but the many are already held inside it. When I connect this symbol to peoples, I am trying to speak about a sacred expression of consciousness, not an insult. The black carries a childlike power, but not only childishness in the negative sense. It carries the sacred child. It carries imagination, rhythm, play, laughter, relaxation, bodily presence, music, movement, and the ability to live more immediately with life. It is the ability to have fun, to not always be hardened into the ego of the world, to not always be locked into seriousness and control. That childlike quality is needed. We need it. The world needs it. Without that, everything becomes hardened, cold, intellectualized, and proud of itself. The Bible says that unless we become as little children, we cannot enter the kingdom. That means something. It means the child is not merely immature. The child carries openness. The child can imagine. The child can play. The child can receive. The child has not yet become so hardened into the world that it thinks it already knows everything. So when I speak of the black as the 0 to 10 stage, I do not mean stupidity. I do not mean worthlessness. I mean the sacred child stage of consciousness, imagination, ease, rhythm, presence, laughter, relaxation, the ability to live in the moment, and the ability to see life in a way that older, harder, more structured consciousness may lose. If we look at the negative side only, we distort it. If someone goes down a certain vein of videos or examples, they can start seeing only what is ugly, chaotic, ratchet, or degraded, and then they begin to feel hatred because that is all they are feeding themselves. But if they go down another vein, they can see beauty, music, laughter, creativity, strength, warmth, family, expression, soul, and suddenly they love again. That shows how sensitive perception is. What we concentrate on changes how we emotionalize what we are seeing. The love is already done. Hate is a choice. Liking and disliking are things we deal with as we endure each moment, but love is deeper than those reactions. That is why I do not want this to become a negative judgment. I want to find what is wonderful in each expression. I want to see what each people's carries that is unique to them, sacred to them, and not interchangeable. The black carries something no other expression carries in the same way. It carries a way of rhythm, language, body, imagination, humor, play, and directness with life that belongs to it. You cannot simply step outside it and fully understand it from the outside. You can observe it, respect it, learn from it, and love it, but there is an inner view there that belongs to that people's. That is their ethos. That is their way of carrying consciousness. Then comes the red, roughly the 10 to 20 stage. The red is the next movement. It still carries the childlike imagination from the black, because every stage contains what came before it, but now that imagination begins to move toward action. It is puberty. It is adolescence. It is blood. It is breath. It is force. It is the beginning of becoming practical. It is the creative fire starting to move out into consequence. The red has a different kind of life in it. It has the blood, the pulse, the warrior, the movement into action, the testing of limits, the learning through consequence. It is not the same as the black, but it is not separate from it either. The red has the child within it, but it also starts becoming something else. It takes the imagination and begins to make it active. It begins to say, what can be done with this? How does this become practice? How does this become movement? How does this become survival, courage, endurance, ceremony, land, blood, and breath? When I think of the red, I think of blood and breath. I think of the body becoming aware of force. I think of the stage where innocence starts meeting consequence. The red carries connection to land, endurance, memory, ceremony, and the living bond between body and earth. It has a strength that is not merely intellectual. It is closer to blood, breath, ancestry, movement, and the reality of being tested by life. That stage can have consequences because everything is held on scales. Every force can become beneficial or destructive depending on how it is held, how it is used, and how it is balanced. Things come and go. They are tried, used, changed, refined, discarded, or made better. That is part of the movement of consciousness, becoming more practical. The red carries the sacred movement from childhood into becoming. It is not yet the fully structured intellect, but it is no longer only the playful imagination. It is imagination beginning to act. It is life beginning to test itself. It is force learning consequence. Then comes the yellow, roughly the 20 to 30 stage. The yellow is where the ego and intellect become more central. It is brightness, mind, calculation, structure, knowledge, high-mindedness, intellectual force, and the ability to produce practical things. This is where consciousness becomes more capable of using thought, mathematics, systems, analysis, tools, invention, and organized production. The yellow is not just thinking. It is the ego becoming bright with its own ability to think. It is the mind beginning to stand in the center and say, I can understand. I can calculate. I can organize. I can produce. I can make tools. I can make systems. I can take imagination and action and turn them into usable forms. This can be beautiful, and it can also become proud. That is the danger of yellow. It can become high-minded. It can become too sure of itself. It can become intellectual ego, where the mind becomes impressed with its own brightness and forgets the whole. But when held properly, yellow gives practical intelligence. It gives skill. It gives the ability to organize knowledge. It gives science, medicine, engineering, mathematics, tools, systems, and technology. Yellow is where the creative and active force begins to become something useful in a structured way. It can build machines, computers, engines, medicines, biological knowledge, systems of thought, and all kinds of tools. It turns the force of earlier stages into something that can be used, repeated, taught, and refined. Again, this does not mean the other stages cannot do these things. Every point contains the whole. Every stage contains all stages. But symbolically, yellow is showing the stage where the intellectual ego, the organized mind, and practical production become dominant. Then comes the white. The white is the stage beyond, the old man symbolism, the wise old man symbolism, but not as a literal man and not as a claim of superiority over people. It is the symbol of a more fully organized expression of consciousness, the stage that gathers what came before it, uses the tools, organizes the systems, governs structures, and carries the burden of full manifestation. This is where I have to be very careful, because before, in anger, I said it in a way that sounded like domination. That is not how I want it understood. I am not trying to say the white man is superior as a person over others. I am not trying to make a hierarchy where the lower is lesser and the top is better. That is not it. That falls into exotericism. It becomes superficial. It becomes the wrong level of understanding. What I was trying to point toward is the symbol of the white as completion, age, structure, organization, and full capability. You do not mess with that symbol in the same way you do not casually challenge the fully formed force of structure with something undeveloped. It is like a man with a pitchfork going against an Apache helicopter. That is not a statement about human worth. It is an image showing the difference between a simple force and a highly organized force. The white, symbolically, is the stage that can use the tools created through the stages before it. It can gather the imagination of the black, the blood and action of the red, the intellect and production of the yellow, and then organize them into systems of power, technology, governance, construction, strategy, and world-shaping structure. But that does not make it morally better. In fact, that level of power can also do tremendous evil. The same force that can build, organize, invent, and shape the world can also enslave, exploit, poison, manipulate, dominate, inflate, corrupt, and destroy. So the white as a symbol is not simply good. It is powerful, structured, and aged, but it carries the danger of hardening, pride, control, and corruption. The wise old man can be wise, but he can also become a tyrant if separated from the whole. That is why none of these can be understood as better or worse. Each one has its gift, and each one has its distortion. The black can be sacred child, imagination, joy, and rhythm, but distorted it can become disorder or immaturity. The red can be courage, blood, breath, land, and action, but distorted it can become violence, reaction, or instability. The yellow can be intelligence, tools, medicine, systems, and production, but distorted it can become ego, arrogance, and cold mental pride. The white can be wisdom, structure, completion, and organization, but distorted it can become domination, exploitation, and control. Every stage is necessary. If you remove one, the whole structure collapses. The child is needed. The adolescent force is needed. The intellectual builder is needed. The old organizing principle is needed. They are not enemies. They are expressions of one consciousness moving through degrees. This is why I do not want the story to only concentrate on the negative. I want to find the wonderful things in each people's, the sacred expression each one carries, the unique ethos each one brings. I do not want to say one is better than the other. I want to say each one is necessary, each one carries something beautiful, and each one reveals a different part of the whole. Black holds all colors. White holds all colors. And if we think about it further, every color holds all colors. That is the deeper point. Every point contains the whole. Even when one color appears separate, the whole is still inside it. Even when one stage appears distinct, the whole consciousness is still present within it. That is why a person who seems to operate mostly from one stage can still do things that appear to belong to another stage. Someone can become a doctor, a police officer, an artist, an inventor, a leader, or anything else because the whole is present in them. Nothing is missing. It is only arranged differently, weighted differently, expressed differently. This is not about fixed limitation. It is about symbolic emphasis. It is about the way consciousness appears to arrange itself in the world. Adam and Eve are also part of this symbolism. I do not think of Adam and Eve as black or white in a literal racial way. That is not the point. Adam is all colors, so symbolically he can be seen as white. Eve is all colors in another way, so symbolically she can be seen as black. But these are not physical people in time the way people usually imagine them. They are symbols. They are expressions of polarity, unity, manifestation, and the one becoming two. When black and white come together, gray appears. When red and yellow come together, orange appears. But this is not merely mixing colors. It is consciousness being seen through color. It is consciousness showing how one expression can combine with another expression and reveal something else. It is not that consciousness is being mixed like paint. It is that consciousness is being seen through the symbolism of color, body, spirit, and manifestation. The pupil belongs here too. If we were to place the black in the body in one respect, it would be the pupil. Not just because the pupil looks black, but because of what the pupil represents. It is the dark opening through which light is received. It is the place where seeing happens through darkness. It is the black point that allows light to enter. That connects to the sun, the spirit, man in form, and the union within. The red belongs to the blood and breath, though the pupil also contains blood in another sense, because nothing is only one thing. You cannot say one symbol is only this and not that. But you also cannot collapse everything into everything so that nothing can be understood. Each thing has its place to be spoken, so that it can be understood, not just understood. There are different ways the body expresses these symbols. The pupil, the blood, the breath, the ego, the mind, the spirit, the form, the light, the darkness, the water, the moon, the sun, all of it belongs to the same pattern. The 6 different worldviews, the body, the elements, the colors, the stages, they all interrelate. Darkness gives itself into light. Light gives itself into manifestation. The one gives itself up to become many. The many appear divided, but the division is not final. It is a manifestation of degrees. It is a spectrum. It is invisible light becoming visible. It is spirit moving through water. It is consciousness becoming form. That is why the black can have a silver glint, why the moon belongs to water, why the womb belongs to darkness, why the pupil receives light, why the red belongs to blood, why yellow belongs to the ego intellect, and why white belongs to completion, age, organization, and the fully gathered form. It is all one symbolic body. And none of this should be used to hate anyone. There is no reason for that. There is no reason to be offended when the thing is being spoken properly. The problem is that words are dangerous when they are too flat. They can make something symbolic sound hateful, or make something deep sound crude, or make something living sound like a dead hierarchy. That is not what this is. This is one consciousness, whole and undivided from the absolute standpoint, expressing itself through colors, stages, peoples, cultures, bodies, symbols, and degrees of maturity. It is a unity appearing as a puzzle. It is one land appearing as continents. It is one light appearing as colors. It is one spirit appearing through many forms. The black teaches the sacred child, imagination, rhythm, laughter, relaxation, presence, and the hidden light inside darkness. The red teaches blood, breath, courage, movement, consequence, land, action, and the creative force becoming practical. The yellow teaches intellect, ego, tools, knowledge, mathematics, medicine, systems, production, and the mind learning to organize what it imagines. The white teaches age, structure, wisdom, completion, organization, responsibility, and the power to gather all previous tools into full manifestation. Each one is beautiful. Each one is dangerous if distorted. Each one is necessary. Each one contains all the others. Each one is part of the whole. That is what I am trying to say. Amen. Let it be so.